What's good, everybody? My name is Modi. This is Modi Makes, and today I'm going to be showing you guys. What's good, everybody? My name is Modi. This is Modi Makes, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different from the normal content that I generally bring to you guys. I needed to kind of make this a shorter video because I'm working on doing a pretty cool video with a friend of mine that'll be coming out soon, and I think you guys will be really excited about, and I need to get to that tomorrow, so I only have, about half as much time as I normally would to make these videos. So I needed to make sure that this one was going to be kind of quick and a little bit more simple than my general paintings and stuff like that I usually do, that can take anywhere to like 10 hours, stuff like that, just to do the painting, let alone the actual filming and everything and the editing, which is honestly the longest part about doing these YouTube videos. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a pretty interesting, pretty accessible, cool style on how to create really interesting, vivid, beautiful photo collages in Photoshop. And the thing that I love about this style, like I just said, is it's really accessible. So if you have Photoshop, you have a basic idea of how to use Photoshop, use layers, use blending modes, and you have a good eye for composition, anyone can do this style. Anyone that has those credentials is fully capable of doing this style. So we're going to get into it here. I'm just going to kind of go through the process with you guys and just kind of talk to you about, what I'm doing, what's going on, everything in between. Maybe I'll make some jokes in there. We'll see. I did not write any script or anything for this one, so we'll see how it goes. I'm just kind of winging it. And I hope you guys dig it. So let's get into it. Essentially, all you're going to need to do is make sure you have a lot of really quality photos. I like to do this style for specific places. So this one is going to be a Yellowstone composition. And I love Yellowstone personally. I love most of the national parks. I love just getting out there and seeing the wildlife, seeing the flowers, seeing all the natural beauty that's going on, doing some hiking, and just kind of forgetting about everything that's going on outside of, I guess just everything that's going on in my normal life from the day to day. It's really nice to be able to get away from that and just kind of think about what's really the most important stuff in life. Is it really just, doing all this? Is it really just the career? Is it really just that? Or is it just having interesting experiences and good stories to tell at the end of it all? And I really think that that's probably the most important thing out of it all. So you're just going to open up Photoshop, and you're going to load in your photos to, one big folder, and make sure that you have, the big thing about this style that I love so much is what makes it so accessible is that people can kind of just let the art create itself as you go along. If you've seen my other videos, you know that I'm really big on kind of free flow, imagination art, stuff that doesn't really need to be fully planned out ahead of time, stuff that doesn't need to take a ton of time doing iterations of sketching and iterations of planning out the entire composition and everything. The thing that's really fun about this is that you let the photos kind of direct how you're going to be creating the piece. You're going to be adding in photos in layers one at a time, kind of seeing how they mesh with each other. What are the interesting parts about the photos? Is it the color? Is it the composition? Is it the contrast between the shadows and the highlights? And just kind of letting those play up on their own without your assistance necessarily. So what you're going to want to do, what I always like to do, is I like to go to unsplash.com. If you've never been to unsplash.com, fantastic website where you can get tons and tons of very, very well shot professional photography, professional photos from professional photos from professional photographers, of literally anything. I mean, not really anything, but anything that is like, if the reason I like to choose specific locations that are pretty famous and well known is because then you have a really good chance of finding, you know, fantastic photos of those locations. So, you know, I've done a few of these pieces before, like 9 or 10 of them. They're all on my Instagram. My Instagram is in the description if you want to check them out, and just other pieces that I do. I try to put up everything that I do on Instagram, but I'm not always the best with social media, which is not necessarily great for a YouTuber, but I don't really... I enjoy sharing the process with you guys and making these videos. That's something really special to me. I find it a lot more enjoyable and just more important than just trying to share my work. But, you know, as an artist, you kind of have to be on Instagram, on TikTok, on all these social media platforms that are good for getting you exposure on your art so that people know what you're doing. People can see your stuff, see if they like it, and potentially, if you're lucky enough, get you some commissions, get you some work, or, you know, just get you a good fan base that's willing to buy prints, that sort of stuff. Anyone out there who does art professionally or has done some art even on the side or whatever knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's just part of the business. It's definitely my least favorite part of the business, but it's part of it. So if you want to check out my Instagram, it's links in the description. Feel free to go check it out, and let me know what you think in the comments, and also let me know what you think of this kind of style of video versus my normal style of videos. Everything helps. I'm always trying to make this channel better and more enjoyable for you guys, so literally anything you can let me know helps. But so what you're going to want to do, what I like to do, is go to unsplash.com, find a place that you want to get photos for, just type it in on the search bar, and you'll find tons and tons of free use photos. They're completely free to use for commercial purposes, even as long as you're you know, gonna use them in an appropriation art way, in terms of the fact that you change the photos enough that it becomes their own piece. It's not cool to just steal people's work and claim it as your own. Obviously, I would never ever say to do that, and make sure you never do that. It's not worth it. Even if you think you can get away with it, it's incredibly uncool, super fucked up. But on top of that, it's just, you're gonna be likely to be found out eventually, and even if you don't have legal action or anything taken against you, people are gonna look at your work differently. Everything that you create is going to be scrutinized as, is that really an original piece? Did they really come up with that? Because I'm not sure that they're capable of doing that. So go to unsplash.com, get the photos, load them into a folder, and I always like to, you know, look at them in thumbnail view, because they're gonna have these stupid names where it's just a bunch of letters and numbers, then the name of the photographer, and then unsplash.com. So you're gonna wanna be able to look at them so you can choose how to layer these, because the way that you layer the photos is pretty important. So once you get your photos chosen and you have them all loaded into a folder, open up Photoshop, choose your dimensions. I'm going here for a poster dimension size of 18 by 24. I just think it's a nice vertical layout, and I don't do a lot of vertical layout stuff, so I kind of wanted to give myself a little bit of a challenge here and do more of a vertical layout instead of the normal horizontal stuff. And then you're going to want to choose your first photo, which is honestly one of the most important things. I always like to choose for my first photo something that has not a ton of incredibly intricate detail in the foreground, and generally that has a horizon line on it, either a skyline or a horizon line. This one's going to be a horizon line because it's a mountain view photo with the sky in the background, because that gives you a good amount of open space on the top of the photo to work with later. And when you're messing around with the blending modes on the second photo that you add in, it's going to help you to not get this piece to be way too cluttered really quickly, because that's something you have to be careful about. When you're doing this style, it's really easy to make the piece super over cluttered. And you know, I am an artist who tends to be against like a lot of negative space. I don't use negative space very well in my pieces. That's something that I'm always trying to work on. I like to fill up everything as much as possible. So this style kind of works for me in that way anyways, because it is gonna be fairly cluttered. I mean, you're going to be putting tons and tons of photos on top of each other and layering them into this piece. So there's going to be a lot of elements going on, but you just got to make sure that you have good compositional flow and that you're taking care to make sure that it's all visually legible, making sure that people can still understand what the elements are, even if you are abstracting them heavily, which you will be. And that's the fun part of it. I mean, you don't have to. You can you can make it into whatever you want to make it, but I like to make it into more of an abstract piece with some recognizable imagery in there. But it just kind of gives it a surrealist feel, and I'm really into surrealism as an art form in general, so that tends to be the way that I go about it. So I'm just going to load in this mountain horizon line view with a forest in the foreground, and I'm going to add that on top of an image of a buffalo standing in a field with another horizon line further in the back. And I'm just going to switch that blending mode. Well, really, I don't know my blending mode super well. I know what most of them do in a general way, but I don't know them well enough to be like, oh, I know exactly what blending mode I'm going to use here. So I like to just put the photo on top of the other one and then click on the blending mode, scroll through them, and just see what pops out. And I think that's obviously something really good to do in this style anyways, because you'll be surprised about what certain blending modes do with the colors, or how the highlights or the shadows show through the different pieces, and what kind of results you can get out of that. And that's where I'm talking about, where it's very free flow, let the piece kind of create itself as it goes, because you'll be able to see what you like about the different blending modes, and then use layer masks to get rid of the stuff that you don't like and just highlight the certain areas, like if it's just certain colors, or if it's just the way that the elements interact with each other. You'll be able to let that happen naturally and just kind of decide. So I'm going to add those in. I'm going to move that mountain down so that it's layered into the buffalo in a nice way that is, I keep saying buffalo, it's a bison. Let's be real here. It's a bison. Not to be all nitpicky about it, but American bison, water buffalo. Anyways, so I'm gonna bring that mountain down so that it sits within the silhouette of the bison, and creates an interesting kind of see-through effect in the bison that lets the mountain darker colors come through while maintaining the horizon line of the grassy fields for the rest of it, and just having kind of a faded, almost like distant look to the mountains behind it. Like there's a lot of atmospheric material between the foreground and the background. And like I said, I highly recommend that you try to keep certain parts of the piece as light as possible in the beginning here, so that you still have a lot of room to play around in the future. Now you're going to be noticing that you can't see the folder that I'm pulling all of these images out of. I like you guys and I trust you a little bit, but I don't trust you enough to be able to show all of my files from my folders on YouTube and have it be visible for everyone. I don't have anything specific to hide. I swear I don't have a couple terabytes of work files sitting somewhere downloaded. Honestly, if you're still downloading stuff like that, I don't know what you're doing. There's a very, very nice website called Something Hub that you can check out, and you won't need to download anything ever again. You'll be fine. Anyways, then I'm going to bring in this geyser image from above, because it has these really interesting colors in it. The water is very, very vividly like that aquamarine, almost Caribbean kind of color, and I assume that has something to do with either, I think it might be like sulfur deposits or something like that that's in it, that also turns the soil around it, or probably more like stone or something, let's be honest, but turns the stone around it into this very vivid yellow, orange to red gradient that goes out. And that's something that you can use your blending modes really well to just pull out those colors and turn it into kind of an abstract piece that you can use as an element. I'm going to place it at the bottom right below the buffalo and cut about half of it off to to make a half circle in the bottom of those colors and just maintain the colors, then go in with a clipping mask afterwards and erase the excess whites that are showing through based on the blending mode that I used. Let me check what blending mode I used for that. I believe, so I used a pin light on that to just pull out those colors and make it so that it's, just the really interesting parts of the photo. Like I said, it's all about just letting the piece create itself and figuring out what are the interesting little pieces on each photo that you can pull out and generally use from that. And just keep playing around with that. Check in every single option that you may have before you go forward. I also like to, since I'm already kind of going abstract with these pieces and making them into, obviously a very digital collage, you can play with that. And so I'm pulling all the images off to the right side of the screen here to create a very stark line on the left side that I'm going to be able to use for some future elements, some future texture, probably elements, maybe colored texture, but not sure about that yet. We'll see. And in doing that, it just gives it this nice kind of almost graphic feel to the image that gives it an interesting contrast, since you're using beautiful natural photography and then you're overlaying it with these graphic elements that just kind of draws the eye in, because you're not used to being able to see these kinds of elements in that sort of format. So it gives you some interesting layering effects that you can play around with and such. So keep playing around with that, and there's only so much I can really say about it, to be honest. You just keep messing around with your blending modes, keep changing the positions of the photographs, where you're putting them, and just keep playing around with what you want to mask out, what you want to let stay in the photo, what you don't. Make sure it's not too cluttered. Again, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record saying that, but that's by far the most important thing. Visual legibility is very important for viewers, because not everyone has any idea about what you're actually putting in to create this piece. I mean, especially in this style, even if you're a trained artist, it's not going to be super easy for you to look at something like this and be like, oh, I know exactly how you got to this point. So making sure that there are still recognizable elements and good compositional flow is going to be key for success in this style. And another reason why I'm doing this format right now, not to just cut into something completely different, but I figured I'd take this time that we have to talk about a couple things. I'm also working on a commission right now. I'm doing a pretty sweet painting for a guy that I know, for his new place that he just moved into. He wanted me to create a painting for him to put over the fireplace. Very elegant, very nice, big old canvas painting. So it's another reason why I don't necessarily have a ton of time to create a video right now, because I need to be working on that later today. An artist's job is never done. I generally work until about 30 minutes before I have to be getting into bed almost every single night. And it's not always super easy to be able to keep up that creative flow throughout the entire day. It's completely okay as a professional artist to be stuck, be feeling bad about your art. It happens to everyone. It happens to me all the time, especially in the early stages of any piece I'm working on. You'll always go through these moments of, I hate this, I suck, I hate this, I suck. But the difference between a successful artist and an unsuccessful artist is if you're willing to push through that and just continue hammering away at the piece. It will come out into something that you like if you're willing to put enough time into it, and if you're willing to just keep cracking at it, you know what I mean? And that's something that's kind of happened to me with this composition that I'm doing for my friend's commission right now. It's definitely outside of my wheelhouse for what he's asking me to do. just in terms of like, I haven't done a lot of physical painting in quite a while, at least not brush wise. I do spray painting and paint pen stuff every once in a while. But for years now, I've been mostly a digital painter and mostly a digital artist in general, graphic designer, that sort of stuff. So I'm a lot more comfortable these days on Procreate and on Photoshop and Illustrator. Whereas back in the day, when I was in college and before that, I was mostly just a physical medium artist, sculptor, painter, drawing always. And I'm going to get into more of that stuff. Even on this channel, I'm going to use it as an excuse to try to get back into that stuff because I miss doing a lot of that work. And I miss the feeling of having just a little bit more control over everything in terms of just like when you're working with brushes on Procreate. Every time you click down, it will change, how the bristles hit the page and stuff like that. And it will change how the brush looks with each brush stroke, but it's random. You don't have any real control over every single bristle that touches down on the piece. So sometimes it's just really hard to get the exact edges and the exact opacity and saturation and everything that you want when you're working digitally, even though you can obviously change all that stuff in the layer modes and everything. But still, you don't have, if you're really good with your tools physically, you're going to have a lot more control than you'll ever have digitally. And it's just something I want to challenge myself to get back into and get better at again, because I miss it. It's fun. And there's something really nice about having tactile pieces, things that you truly made by hand, and that you don't have to just print out and make prints of. It's already a physical object inherently when you create it. All right, and back to this. So you notice here that I'm trying to add in some of these salt flats and stuff like that, and it's just not really working. It's a little too cluttered for the most part, but there is a certain element that I do like about it. I like this white that's coming out of the bottom because I set it to lighten, and the bottom of the image being the grass and these very saturated colors from the geyser are only going to really allow that white to show through. So I'm just going to erase pretty much everything except for just that one little element on the bottom there, and keep that as a nice little compositional flow piece that goes through and cuts through that color. But I honestly think it's going to look better if I pop that color on top. So I'm going to pop that color back up on top and just keep the white kind of in the background and have it show through a little bit in the blues and the yellows, and just have it be almost like a painterly effect going through there. I think that'll be pretty interesting. Something that's nice to put down there. Because as I had said before, compositional flow, very, very, very important on this. So if you don't know about compositional flow, I honestly don't really know why you would if you didn't go to art school, because it's not something that would really help you in your day-to-day life unless you're making art all the time like I am. But it's the way that your eye moves around the image based on how the different elements in the image draw your eye. So you're going to want to make sure that your eye has a good focal point to focus on. Generally, it's going to be something that is very vividly colored, something that is really dark, or if you have like a face or a recognizable object, a lot of times those are the things that your brain are immediately going to latch onto, or your brain is immediately going to latch onto. And just because it's, humans are incredible at pattern recognition. That's one of the only reasons why we're so successful as a species, and why we're able to communicate the way that we do and use things like written language and shorthand drawings, cartoons, stuff like that. We're really good at being able to fill in the gaps and recognize the pattern that is trying to be achieved. So you're going to want to define what your focal point is. You don't necessarily have to plan it out ahead of time, but you'll want to figure out as the piece grows what you think the inherent focal point of the piece is going to be. And for me, my eye either immediately goes to this center buffalo image or the heavily saturated color of the geyser at the bottom. So that kind of cuts you in the middle there or at the very bottom, and you're going to want to add in elements that will allow your eye to naturally flow up and around the piece in a way that is going to allow your eye to kind of, without trying, glaze over the entire image and take in as much information as any human can in one pass. I mean, obviously you're going to look at it, if you like the piece and you're interested in the piece, you're going to look at it for a while and you're going to check all the little elements individually and eventually kind of find your way around the piece naturally. But it's a lot more enjoyable experience if you, as the artist, kind of hold their hand a little bit and guide them around the piece just in the way that you use certain line work, edge work, and just different like directional imagery. Oh my god, this light. Guys, this light is gonna kill me. I bought these super cheapo lights off of Amazon, and this one for some reason just does not want to stay on. I mean, obviously it's like a cheap light, so that's probably the majority of the part of it, but every time I'm working in here, I'll be shooting videos and just one of my lights will cut off. Like if I'm doing a time lapse or something, one of my lights will just cut off and I'll continually have to go over and unplug it and replug it back in to get it to work again. And it is very, very frustrating, but give me a second. I gotta go plug this back in. There's a good close up for you. All right, back to it. Sorry about that, folks. All right, so, and then here I'm gonna be adding in a pretty vertical geyser plume element. First of all, because these really bright white, like clouds, smoke, these sort of steam plumes, stuff like that, are very easy to cut out and have them look good if you set them to any of the lighten modes. But I always like to check, because I'm very into like the subtract, the difference, those modes that flip and invert colors, because you can get some really, really interesting, weird alien-like color palettes going on when you do that sort of stuff. So I always like to check them, but eventually I'm just going to set it to, well, I guess actually pin light's going to work the best for me. I was kind of assuming it would be lighten or something like that, but yeah, like I said, I don't understand the blending modes super, super well. There's a couple of them that I know exactly what they do, but for the most part, I just flip through them like that. And I was able to find this pin light one that works great, so I'm able to isolate just the plume coming out of it and maybe keep a couple trees in the bottom, because I'll be able to add that into the horizon line. I'm thinking, yeah, the horizon line about there. Let's see. Yeah, about there, because that way it gets cut off a little bit on the side of the image, gives it an interesting sort of crop, and that's also going to help draw your eye back up the image, and then it's going to naturally want to follow this mountain horizon line back to the left, where we can then use this vertical cutout on the left side to bring your eye back down and back around to the heavily saturated colors here. And then we'll add in some elements to draw your eye back up and around towards the buffalo and back towards the plume later. So we're gonna have to figure that out. That's just gonna be testing out a lot of different things to see how we can draw the eye around there. So I'm just gonna mess around with some things for a little bit. I might need some concentration here. I'll speed through this and and start talking again a little bit later on. was able to bring in this nice element of, I think it's just another image of one of those more sulfuric kind of ponds, maybe a geyser or something like that, into the image that adds in some really nice reds to the image and also brings a compositional flow element in to bring your eye back up from the geyser image at the bottom and back around to where the buffalo's head is, or the bison. The bison's head is, so that you can bring your eye back up towards that plume of steam back around on the horizon line and back down this left vertical strip. But I need to add in some kind of line work elements that I think will help give your eye something to follow on this left side here. So I'm bringing in this vertical image of these rivers, and I'm going to place them. No, that doesn't work right. It doesn't line up correctly with the horizon line. So we're gonna bring it, over there. No, I want that vertical image, where it cuts in from the right side and brings it back down. So then I'm just gonna need to get rid of this intrusion in the middle of the image here and just keep that left bar there, so that you can only see this certain part of the river that allows it to draw your eye back down from the horizon line, and where it lines up perfectly. Well, not quite perfectly, but it lines up well with the mountain line. Maybe I can bring in another element to draw your eye back down from that mountain line to this river here that brings it back around and kind of creates a wonkus loop around the image that your eye is drawn to the whole time. So I'm just going to mess around with finding the right colors from the blending modes. I'm thinking that's too much. I think I want to bring in that natural color of the natural blue of the river in there, and that brings in some nice texture in the whites from the river itself too. So I think I'm gonna go with that. That brings out the natural elements, and also just makes it a little more interesting, adds more texture, adds more interesting elements into the piece itself. I think sorry, I know I'm not necessarily being the best for commentary right now. I get distracted when I start to work. You get lost in the concentration of it all. But I was just, I decided to do this unscripted, just workflow commentary, and I guess it's coming back to bite me in the ass. But like I said, let me know how you feel about this versus my normal stuff. If you like it more or not, anything helps a lot. But so I just added in this other bison image and set it to pin light, and erased away pretty much everything except for a little bit of, I think it's his breath coming in the cold or something like that, a little bit of this kind of steam element, and that allowed me to close the gap between in the compositional flow between the river that I have on the left side and the horizon line on the top, because the river runs into the right where the top of the buffalo's back is bison. Right where the top of the bison's back is, and kind of just allows your eye to more easily flow to that area and back. And then I'm going to try to add in this extra mountain element. It's pretty cluttered though. I'm not sure if this is going to be able to do much of anything for me. The piece is pretty much there as it is right now. Like I said, it's a really quick thing to do, and pretty accessible way to go about it. There might be something I can draw out of this, but let's see. It's just going to be a lot more of just like messing around with layering different elements and stuff onto there right now. Just seeing if there's anything else that I think will actually add anything. But it's pretty close. It's pretty close. You know, it's that classic thing where you never know, like as an artist, it never feels like your piece is done. And you also don't want to overwork it, because a lot of the time that's like the the destruction of all good art is when it's overworked. Oh yeah, okay, but I like bringing in, I like bringing in this extra horizon line on the top. That helps with the compositional flow even more. I'm thinking that's gonna stay. But that's the beauty of just trying. Like, it felt like it was pretty much done, but I didn't feel like it was really completely done. So I messed around with adding in a little bit of extra bit, and it worked out perfectly. Well, I don't know about perfectly, but it worked out in my humble opinion. And then also, you'll notice that I am saving basically after every single element that I put in. I think it's super important, especially when you're doing this, because one of the other cool things about Unsplash is that you're able to download the images at their original size, which I always like to do for these pieces, because when you download them at their original size, and you make a big 18 by 24 inch poster size piece and you want to get it printed out, you're going to want to make sure that all your elements look good, even if you press Control-1 and go to 100% on Photoshop. That's something that I learned a lot about when I was working as a digital artist for a custom artwork company here in the city. Not going to name any names, but they were incredibly particular about making sure that when it's at 100% that there's no pixelization, it doesn't look grainy, anything like that, which obviously super important, because they're a custom artwork company. Everything they're doing is printed out generally at huge sizes, so we had to be very pixel perfect. You would have to go in at 100% and literally scan the entire piece for any little weird elements, and use the healing brush tool and get rid of them all. Any little grains or any little out of place dots and stuff like that. I don't tend to be quite as careful about that kind of stuff in my own art, well, at least not in this style, because I find that sort of stuff is kind of the natural elements that I think make the piece more interesting. I personally like it. Not everyone does, but I do. It makes it feel like a more natural piece and just makes it feel like it's actually created by a human. You know what I mean? That's the sort of stuff that shows the artist's hand, which I think is always really interesting when you're viewing people's art. You know, the perfectionism is part of that too, though. Like, there are definitely certain artists that's kind of their whole bit, is that they are very pixel perfect, and that shows their hand. You know what I mean? If that's what they want to do, then they're going to want their pieces to look like that, so that you know that they're the ones who made it versus someone who's just doing their style. That's not really me. I personally like kind of looser stuff, especially like in paintings and things. I like to have the brushwork be pretty apparent, and have that kind of texture to it. I think that's kind of the beauty of doing paintings. I don't necessarily want my art to look like it's incredibly clean. I find it to be a little less interesting, and that's also why, like, a lot of the times I don't really go for realism ever. I mean, I have, and I probably will at some point on the channel. But realism isn't really something that I actively strive for in my art. I think that there's something more interesting about creating something new versus just trying to replicate what you can see as closely as possible. No hate to people who do realism. It's obviously super technically impressive, and I'm not necessarily the best at it, so I'm not going to tell you that there's anything wrong with doing realism. That would be messed up, because art is all about doing whatever you love to do. That's the whole point. But I personally like art better when it is something that you cannot find in the real world, when it's something that's very out there and different and interesting, and like something that is just brand new. I think that's the creating is the whole point of art, right? And so if you can, if your art looks like a photograph, that's kind of what photographs are for, in my opinion. And photography is amazing. It's an art form in and of itself, and it requires a ton of technical know-how if you want to make actually really good photos instead of just taking photos of things. But it's not personally what I go for in my own style, in my own artwork. I like to make things that some people would call a little more cartoony, a little more street art, that sort of kind of thing. I'm really mostly an illustrator who likes to paint and sometimes likes to make these photo collages. And I like my style to be pretty funky and just different and out there. I think a really important thing for anyone who's trying to get into doing art and trying to make a career out of it, the most important thing you can do is find your own style and make it completely unique to you. It's not easy, but also it's natural. Like, if I've been asked before, how do you find your style? And one of my favorite quotes is from Drawfee, actually. They were joking around, but I always loved it. They were talking about, like, it's always been there. It's you can't escape your style. It's your style is kind of part of your limitations and part of what you excel at, all kind of coming together. You don't have much of a choice in whether or not your style is going to manifest itself. It's just about putting in the work for long enough, keep making stuff, figure out what you like about the stuff that you make and what you don't like about the stuff that you make, fixing the stuff you don't like and enhancing the stuff that you do like, and eventually it will really show that it's your own stuff, and that it's your own style, and no one will be able to mistake it for anyone else. And I'm not saying, I'm definitely not saying don't try to replicate styles of people that you're really impressed by. That is definitely an incredibly good training tool and helps you to find different techniques that you wouldn't otherwise have tried out yourself. So definitely do that. But just take the elements that you do like from those styles that you've mimicked before and that you've tried before, and then apply them into your own thing. It's similar to, I believe it's pronounced Kim Jong-gi, the Korean illustrator, who's one of my personal heroes because he is just absurdly, incredibly talented. His whole thing was, don't draw what you see, go and look at things and then come back and draw them later when you're not looking at them anymore. And that wasn't necessarily about finding style or anything like that, but it's more about not copying necessarily, and it helps you to gain a sort of cataloged memory of how to create certain elements and maybe certain characters or like perspectives or things like that, and then you'll be able to draw them on your own without reference later. And working without reference is definitely one of the biggest ways to help your style come through, because when you're working with reference, it's always really easy to fall into, I'm just going to sketch based on the line work that they did, or I'm just going to essentially copy, kind of what they had already created, and there's not necessarily anything super impressive. Anyway, so just try to work from your own imagination and your own memory as much as possible. That's going to help you out a lot defining your own style, and also just kind of defining what you want to emphasize in your art, and what you really what you want your subject matter to be and stuff like that. I'm not a person who really works in just one style. People can gain a lot of success by having a specific style that they work in and that they're known for. Generally, it's recommended to find a style and just kind of work at that until you master it. I personally have 3, 4, maybe even 5 different kind of styles that I like to switch between. I find it pretty boring to just kind of work in one style in one way all the time. It just gets tiresome after a while. I like to try new things and get a wide breadth of abilities, and it also, if you try a bunch of new things, you'll be able to add all of that stuff back into your own work and make your own work even better. So I think it's great to try a bunch of different styles. There's a lot of people that don't do that, and they're very successful regardless. So don't let anyone tell you that there's only one way to do things. That's really the key to all of it, but make sure that your stuff is original and it's true to you. All right, so we got the piece done here. I think this is pretty much all I'm going to be able to do to it without it becoming incredibly over-cluttered and without it being, just too much. I really like the way that this turned out. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. How you like the piece, what you would want me to change about the piece, if you do want me to change anything, if you have any ideas about videos that you'd want me to do later, then please leave those down in the comments below. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, let me know if you like this new format, or if you like my other videos. If you haven't seen my other videos, it's the first one you're watching, please go check them out. It helps out a ton. If you guys like what I do and you want to help support me, obviously like and subscribe, the easy things to do. It really, really helps out a ton. I'm a brand new channel, very, very small. So if you can hit that like button, if you can subscribe, that helps with my engagement and helps my videos be shown to more people. So that would be fantastic, and I couldn't thank you enough. And also, I am a clothing designer as well. I have my own line called Heartworn. So if you want to check that out too and buy some shirts, that helps out a ton. So if you do, go to heartwornclothing.com. The link will be in the description as well. We also have an Instagram page at heartwornclothing. That's a pretty fun Instagram page. I do some little artistic things on there. There's obviously a lot of photography of the clothing, and then 2 to 3 times a week, I try to release a goofy 1-minute sketch video that we kind of just shoehorn in advertisements for the clothing. People seem to enjoy them, so we keep making them, and I really love to make them. I just do stupid stuff with my friends and make them into funny videos. So if you want to check that out, at Heartworn Clothing on Instagram and heartwornclothing.com, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. And I will catch you guys next time. See ya.